Welcome back to the Live Worthy podcast. I'm your host, Erin Aruda. We're excited to have you here. This is a podcast where we inspire and equip you to live worthy of your calling, for you have been called by God. That's what Paul urges us in Ephesians 4:1. We're in the midst of a series of women who have lived worthy. We're being inspired by their messages and the way that they live their lives. And I have with me again the lovely Lisa Ward. Welcome back, Lisa.
Hi, I'm excited to be here again.
Yay! So we have had so much fun talking about Perpetua and Felicitas on our last one. We have a really fun person we're talking about today, and
I can't wait.
I think we have a connection because I learned recently that you have been to China.
I have.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tell us about that. When did you go?
2014-ish. And I went with Stephen Curtis Chapman's organization to his Maria's Big House of Hope. It's a medical orphanage. And it was insane. We got to stay in the orphanage and work with the kids and see how they do life, and also visit some places in China. But it was really amazing to be a part of that culture and just see what God's doing specifically in that spot.
Yeah, I love that. I think you're going to bring some interesting insight today as we talk about this woman who lived worthy of her calling. Her name was Gladys Aylward. She was a missionary in mainland China. She was born in 1902. So, anyway, her story is so compelling because she was not a woman of much means. She was a maid. She didn't have a whole lot, but what she had, she really laid down for the Lord. So in 1928, she was serving as a maid. She had kind of left school. She wasn't, by her own admission, like super bright. She kept thinking that God would call somebody else because she didn't feel like she could, she wasn't intellectual enough. Like all these things we say about ourselves.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. We disqualify ourselves constantly, right? So she really did that. But at the same time, she had this encounter with the Lord in her earlier years of late teens, early 20s, and she began to commit her life to the Lord. She was at a revival meeting and really felt his call, and she kept thinking about this far off place called China. She was really loved Hudson Taylor, who was a missionary as well, and she was reading the scripture and started to hear and see the word go in so much of scripture.
Wow.
Yeah. So she was advised by her mentor, keep listening to the Lord. He's going to give you where you're meant to go. But while she waited, she was working as a maid and serving others. And then she stumbles upon this story, not stumble, I guess, but she was reading through the scripture, saw in Abraham was told to go. Moses is told to go and leave the wilderness and enter into this next place and phase of God's promise. And then she gets to Nehemiah. And I just want to read the first chapter, because if you're sitting in Gladys's position and you're thinking, gosh, I feel called to go to China. I have no money and I have no means. I have no one with me. And I don't have any way to get there. Like she was just facing all of these obstacles. So she reads out of Nehemiah, this chapter 1, his prayer, which is so powerful. It says that here they said to me, those who survive the exile are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates have been burned with fire. When I heard these things, says Nehemiah, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. Then I said, Lord, the God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer your servant is praying before you day and night for your servants, the people of Israel. So she began to take ownership of the plight of another nation, which was China, right? For Nehemiah, it was Israel. But she saw the people of China as she read this story of Nehemiah and this prayer that he had. And then she gets to the end of the chapter and it says he was a cupbearer. She said that she felt like this connection because he was a servant. Wow. Isn't that cool?
That's so cool. That is.
Yeah.
I mean, what if she hadn't have been in her word? she wouldn't have been picking up on those words, go, go, go. She may not have read Nehemiah's story. Like that's already, I've never heard of her. So hearing her story, that strikes me right off the bat. Be in your word.
Practice.
Yeah.
Right? Practice the ways of Jesus,
Yes.
who knew the word. So she gets to this place of going, okay, I'm going to go. And she begins to say, like, I don't know how this money is going to come. She believed that it was going to take her 3 years. In fact, when she went to the train station, the guy was like, you're out of your mind. You can't just go to China. Like, I'm not going to let this happen. And she's like, I'm going to come every time I get £1 worth of money, right? Because she was from England. She said, every time I have a pound, I'm going to give it to you, and it's going to save. I need like 47 pounds to go. And she's like, it's going to take me 3 years to get there.
Oh, wow.
It did not take her 3 years. It took her months to get it.
Oh, my
and he was
goodness.
amazed. And so she ends up boarding this train without anyone because she had gone through the China Inland Mission. And she had failed. She had spent 3 months. And they were like, we actually don't think you're any better off.
Wow. Talk about being discounted.
They're like, you're never going to learn the language. We don't think you have the capacity to do this. And so they really were like, sorry, but we're not going to send you.
Wow.
So she really went without anyone but the voice of the Lord. And what was so great about how she responded to them when they said this was she was like, I really want to thank you guys for letting me be a part of, like, this is my modern day, right, translation. But I really want to thank you guys because what I've learned here is how to pray. I learned how to pray. And so if that was what this was meant to be, then I'm grateful for it. And I will always thank you. Even though it didn't work out the way she wanted to.
No bitterness, no resentment.
Yeah.
Just, okay, I'll take what I can and keep on going.
Yeah. So this 5'0", she was a very small woman. She's 5'0", has dark hair, and she boards a train, and she has to go through Russia and Siberia before coming to China. And so there is a war progressing here between Russia and China at the time. So she's literally going into the heart, or it was between Russia and Japan, excuse me. So she's literally traveling into the heart of it. And there's no Google Translate at this time. So she's just like, I know no language. And now I'm going to venture through all these different countries. So she goes through Germany and, gets to Russia, and she begins to see the effects of communism as she's entering Russia. So she gets to Russia, and they get to as far as the train will go because there's an active war. And she's on the train, and because of the translation issue, she can't understand that they're telling her to get off here. So she stays on the train and she gets to the front lines. And they said, well, our train isn't coming back until it's full of wounded. So you'd be here and probably starve. So you're going to have to walk all the way back to the stop in the middle of the cold, in the middle of Siberia. They're like, just follow the train tracks.
What?
So she does.
Keep talking, Erin.
Yeah. So she goes all the way back. And when she does, they take her passport because they're like, you're English. We, think you'd be better served here. So this guy takes her passport and she's like, oh man, what am I going to do now? And suddenly she becomes very aware that they mean to keep her in this place. And she's set on getting to China. So this girl finds her who's been watching her, and she says, I want to tell you that there's going to be a man that's going to come and he's going to get you out of here. And she's like, who do I trust? Right? Do I trust this guy who's taken my passport and is telling me that he's going to get me there and all this stuff? Or do I trust this girl who just told me this old man's going to come and to follow him and don't make a stink? Yeah. So the guy that ends up coming to her room that has her passport, she takes her passport out of his hand right away, and she could feel his this evil around him. She knows he intends to keep her and harm her. And so she says this really powerful statement. She grabs the passport, and then she tells him very persistently, "You cannot come in. You cannot. You may not believe in God, but he is here." She says, "Touch me and see. Between you and me, God has a barrier. Now go." She said, "He stared at me, then shivered, and without another word, he left."
Ooh.
So she looks at her passport, and in this moment, she's looking at her passport, and he had changed the profession on her passport from missionary to machinist. And so immediate, because they were wanting to keep her there as a machinist to work for the communist government, right?
Yeah.
So he ends up leaving, and this right after that, she's like freaking out, but she kept believing that God, she had the same God that Nehemiah had, that Moses had, that Abraham had, and so she kept believing that. And she said, "I know, God, you're right here with me,"
because she knows who he is.
Yes,
she knows who her God is.
Yes,
doesn't matter what these people who speak different languages come at her with.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So right after that, the guy shows up at her door, and so she follows him, and they're rushing through, and he said, basically, at this point, if you want to get out of here, you have to become a Japanese prisoner, and then they'll take you. And so she does. She becomes.
Well, sure, that makes sense.
She said, but the Japanese guy was so nice, and gave her a space on the ship, and the Russians, as she was leaving, they kept a piece of her coat because they were trying to keep her, and she jumped onto the boat as it was leaving. I mean, it was like,
wow,
pretty compelling.
This would make a great movie.
It is a movie.
What?
In the 1950s. I love that you didn't even know that.
I don't know anything about this.
Yeah, Ingrid Bergman played her in a movie.
Movie night.
Yeah. A movie night. Yeah, we'll do it. So anyway, it becomes a movie, and her life as well. But she makes it all the way to China and meets this woman whose husband had died. She was a missionary there, and she had requested from the China Inland Mission that somebody come take her position, but nobody wanted to. And she was like, "I'll go.
I flunked out, but here I am."
Still going. So it took her a year. That woman within that year died as well. Her name was Jenny Lawson. And but at the time she was teaching her, she was learning the language and everything. She
her mentor.
Yes.
That's so beautiful.
It's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they had this little inn that they would bring people into, and they could sleep overnight, and they would tell them these 8 virtues of Christianity that really lent to the narrative of Buddhism that was prominent. Mm-hmm. And so they could link these two things together, but help them discover the nature and truth of Jesus through it. So they used the cultural context to share the gospel of Jesus. She became friends with one of the government officials. At that time, they had just written an edict that was saying, okay, we're going to outlaw foot binding. It was like a big thing for centuries.
Right.
And it would really limit women's capacity to do anything. So she went house to house and would tell them about Jesus and help them undo some of their thoughts about foot binding and, very traditional practice. Yeah. She was really instrumental, and she gained the name by the locals as the virtuous woman.
Wow.
Right out of Proverbs 31.
Right.
Isn't that something?
Yes.
So her story goes on. She starts an orphanage. She begins to bring in children, hundreds of them. And then the war between China and Japan comes to her village. And probably the most beautiful part was she had planned to really live her life in China forever. So she became a citizen in 1936.
Oh, wow.
Learned the language and was really instrumental in prison reform and all kinds of good things that were happening there. She had this really beautiful relationship with one of the government officials. He was the Mandarin, and he didn't understand her. He didn't understand her religion, but he just found her so interesting. And so she kept relationship and all of that. So when this war comes, he's like, you've got to get out of here because they're coming straight to the village and the kids are going to really suffer. And so he, at that time, sees this kind of impending doom and gives his life to Jesus. So this was like a great victory to her, right? All of this time spent with him. So anyway, the story, she gets wounded as she's getting the kids prepared, and they had to trek over 100 miles. She takes 100 children. I know you have a lot of kids,
wow.
Lisa. Imagine 100.
I cannot.
Does it
I
feel
cannot
like 100?
imagine 6, trekking 6. On foot on a journey.
Over mountains.
Yes.
Yeah, so they travel mountain ranges, and she ends up, it took them 12 days, and they finally make it all the way to this safe haven, and she has typhus and fever and is in complete delirium, barely making it, but somehow by the grace of God gets all the way there and all the children to safety. Can you?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So communist China comes, and she ends up trying to get back to mainland China. She never does, but she ends up in Taiwan, which is, in the Republic of China, an island. And she starts Gladys Aylward Orphanage and lives there until 1970 and dies in that spot.
That makes my trip to China even more special with the orphanage connection.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How have I not heard of her before?
She's one of my favorites.
I'm so glad you're telling this story. Thank you.
She is one of my favorites. I think just so brave and courageous, right? And faced with so many doubts and so alone in this venture, like counted out by everyone. So I have a couple quotes I want to share because she wrote her story. She's got a couple of books penned by her. So one of the things that she says is, I wasn't God's first choice for what I've done in China. I don't know who it was. It must have been a man, a well-educated man. I don't know what happened. Perhaps he died. Perhaps he wasn't willing. And God looked down and saw Gladys Aylward. And God said, well, she's willing.
That's all it takes, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, what does that mean to be a willing vessel? Like, how does that shift and change the trajectory of our life?
I mean, just looking at what all God did through her, it shifted cultures. Like, it changed people groups. But yeah, ask your question again.
How does it change? Like, how does it shift the trajectory of our life? Have you had those moments where you're like, man, maybe I wasn't God's first choice, but I'm willing?
Oh, for sure. For sure. Well, even with just the plan of life as we lay it out and the way it should go, and it doesn't go that way by circumstances beyond our control. And God says, nope, stay right here on this path. There was a season in my life where he literally instructed me to just keep my head down and keep walking on the path. So I wasn't being distracted by what was going on around me. I wasn't seeing the things that might have been coming at me on all sides because I was walking on his path. And that's the only place I needed to be. And that was a difficult season. But even right now, I'm in a good season comparatively. And he keeps telling me, eyes on me, eyes on me. Whether, there's relationship struggles or things with my kids or whatever, he's just, keep your focus on me.
Does it feel alone?
It does sometimes. It does sometimes. Even just feeling misunderstood sometimes with this track and this path, and just nope, I know this is where I need to be and I'm going to obey. But yeah, it does feel a little lonely sometimes.
Yeah. What do you do with that? Those feelings of loneliness and sort of that perspective. Like, I think about when she's in that room by herself and she's completely alone in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Right. And that man comes and approaches her door. She sort of has this moment like, I know I am, God is with me. I am with God. So how do we reconcile, or how have you reconciled those two places of God is with me and yet I am alone.
Yeah. Well, that particular part of the story, what stuck out to me was God's provision in going ahead of her, because like the woman who was already there in China, who was waiting for her, like God placed her there. She didn't know she was going to find someone who spoke her language and could teach her things, but God had already provided that. So in that waiting, in that journey, in that struggle in between, I think expectancy is a good word that points towards hope. Like she held to the word go. I imagine. I mean, I don't know her.
Yeah.
I just found out about her. But it just sounds like from her life, she clung to God's word and he told her to go. And so her faith and her trust, even in those lonely moments, I can't imagine how frightening parts of that story had to have been. And just the determination to keep going is remarkable. But God said, go, and she believed him. She trusted.
She believed him. Like it would be enough, right?
Yeah.
To just do what he said.
Well, and I mean, it sounds like she went with reckless abandon, because what if I die walking on this train track in the middle of Siberia? I'm still going to do it anyways, even if. Like, that seems like her mode.
Yeah, there's that psalm that says, what can mere mortals do to me? So it repeats it in the psalm. And it's like, what can they do if God is for me? Who can be against me? And so I love that she didn't analyze too much of the calling. She read the word and she obeyed the command and what was being placed on her heart. The burden of her heart was very tangible to her. And so she couldn't get past it. These people in China that she never met, right?
Yeah.
And she sees them. So there's this other quote that she has, because I think sometimes we want more fanfare for being obedient.
Well, sure.
Maybe just me, but like, oh, I should have a parade
Look,
every time.
I'm doing it.
And there's I think there is a parade in heaven, right? That's Aaron's theology, not, I don't know if that's biblical, but she says this beautiful thing. She says, I have been a fisher of men. I went to China because God asked me. I did not have missionary training or missionary status. I was answerable to him and no one else.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, what she may have been considering, and I think sometimes when I get stuck in my like, what does all this mean? And how do I keep moving forward? How do I finish strong? It's like that picture of heaven and standing before the throne of God and saying, I've done all that but it's me and you at the end of this, and you're who I answer to. And so regardless of whatever other commendation I receive, or for her, how her passport even changed, it didn't even say missionary anymore. It said machinist.
Yeah.
So all of that is, but let man think whatever they want to of me, but it's between you and I, Lord. And
it's simple. We overthink it. I love her humility in feeling like I'm not good enough for this. I'm not smart enough for this. Perhaps that aided her in just simply obeying and not thinking through all the thousands of ways this could go terribly wrong.
Yeah. How do you shut that off when you think about it? Oof, is right.
It's a hard one, but the thing he's been telling me right now, I'll say it again, is just keep your eyes on me. Eyes on me. Don't be distracted. And that's easy to say. It's a lot harder to do.
Yeah. I think as we think about this, we may think nobody's paying attention, nobody's watching, nobody's noticing that I'm actually following the things that God has said, and that's okay, right? We have to come to a place where we're like, I'm not doing it for that. I'm not doing it for praise or glory. I'm doing it for your name to be praised and glorified, and you can take my life and do whatever you want with it. It's yours, Jesus. And so but there are ones watching, and for Gladys, there was a whole village watching, but most importantly, I think there was 100 children watching her and how she was living her life. And so there's this beautiful moment she writes about. It says that she comes to this place where they're walking that 100-mile trek, right? And On the 12th day, they had arrived at the Yellow River with no way to cross it. This is her writing. All boat traffic had stopped and all civilian boats had been seized to keep them out of the hands of the Japanese. The children wanted to know, why don't we cross? And she said, well, there are no boats. They said, God can do anything. Ask him to get us across. So they all knelt and prayed, and then they sang. And a Chinese officer with a patrol heard the singing and rode up. He heard their story and said, think I can get you a boat.
Wow. I've said wow a lot.
Yeah.
The whole story. But yeah, you're not really alone. Just like he went before her with that woman. Like, even when I do feel like I'm not being noticed or celebrated, it's not true.
Right.
There's a community of women he's surrounded me with, of family members, of my church. Like, I'm in community. So that's a lie.
Yeah.
It's a lie that nobody sees and nobody notices and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's not true.
And I think to me, what the most important, because what I want in my life is to look at the next generation. What does that look like for me to walk faithfully with the Lord when I'm in that time frame, when I'm in that age, when I'm in that range of life and season of life? What does it look like? And when I see women ahead of me still following faithfully the Lord, still living the dreams and callings that he's given them, I think, okay, I'm going to have longevity. I can be faithful like them. It inspires me. And I think about that for the generation behind me. I want them to go further and faster than I have. And so if they can see me laying my life down, they'll know what it looks like when they get to this season. And it'll look different, but ultimately, aren't we watching the next generation?
Yeah.
To see what it's going to
And
look
they're
like?
already doing that. They're already. Yeah.
It's so wild. So she had all these eyes upon her, and not that we do it for eyes at all or for glory like that, but ultimately the world began to know her story. And so we don't know what will come of our story, but I think the opportunity is for us to go full tilt, whatever it means.
Yes.
Embrace the entire journey of what God is calling us to do to live worthy, and see where it might literally take us.
Yeah. Even the hard parts.
Yeah.
Because they won't last.
That's true.
They won't last.
Yeah. To be patiently enduring the suffering.
Yeah.
She has this final thing I want to close with today, our time. And she says, I work kind of alongside everyone. We're all after the one thing, souls for Jesus Christ. I don't care if they're sprinkled or immersed. She worked between all of these different denominations. And I think the power of the unity of her voice to say, it doesn't matter what people group I'm serving. It doesn't matter where I find myself, in England or in Russia or in China. I am going to serve the Lord. And I think that's a demonstration of unity that we're really recognizing.
Yes.
This is the hour for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah. So we'll stop there for today, but I know we'll piggyback on that on the next
so
episode.
It's so good.
Thank you for joining me, Lisa.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is fun.
And
I learned a lot.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I want to thank you guys for coming and joining us today, and we will see you next time. I also want to thank Porter Media for their amazing work getting this podcast going for us and making us look lovely and very legit. Thank you, Porter Media. We'll see you next time.